This is James Mathers for the Digital Cinema Society at NAB 2025. I'm here with Paul McAniff at the Canon booth, and he's going to tell us about some really interesting new lens technology. It's mostly for sports, I guess, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's been developed specifically for sports, but it could be used for, I guess, any number of applications. Sports definitely being the focus. It's what we're calling the Novel Look Optical Unit. So the optical unit itself is a modification upgrade we're offering in the UJ122. The idea here is that the need for shallow depth of field, cinematic looking footage in high-end sports has been ever increasing. And that's not just for handheld cameras where it's really easy to do it, but it's also for hard cameras like this where there's a dedicated position. Now the issue with that has always been that they have to build a dedicated camera for this hero shot. It's got if not a cinema camera, a large sensor broadcast style camera, which is essentially the same. It's a very, very expensive SMPTE chain to build for a dedicated shot that can't be used for regular game coverage and is only used a small number of times in any game. So we thought to ourselves, well, how can we preserve the value and the functionality of a regular position, not give up the position, and then add this look? So what we came up was this Novel Look Optical Unit. Now, the way that it works inside the lens is every one of these lenses comes with two optical units already on a turret or a wheel, and it's the 1x and then the 2x magnifier, which are pretty well known. There was a point in history where we had a 1.5 magnifier too. That kind of fell out of use. We didn't, as I like to say, we didn't reinvent the wheel, we just plugged a hole in it. So there was a counterbalance that we put there. So we had this unused spot, and in it we put this optical unit. Now what the optical unit does is it helps to mimic a shallow depth of field. You still have a 2/3 sensor, so you're not really achieving the same shallow depth of field you would with a Super 35 or a full frame or something like that, but you are starting to imitate those properties. Now one of the things that it does, if you have a sharp image and you're at a 1.7 on a very long lens like this, the lens compression is going to give you a shallow depth of field anyway. But when you're shooting fast-moving dynamic sports, it's extremely hard to follow that because it's still paper thin. So one of the things that this optical unit does is it creates a smooth image. Now it's not a soft image, it's smooth. This allows the background to really melt out of focus, and then the primary subject remains in focus much easier. Now you're still shooting wide open. You're still at a 1.7, a 2.0, a 2.8, something like that. However, the operational range, because of that smooth image, that the camera operator has to move the focus demand has increased significantly. So they can do a follow focus on somebody who's moving, not lose them even if they're moving quickly, I mean, depending on the operator, of course, but in that environment, that's normally something that you can't do. And then the obvious question is, well, how did you make that work? And really, we took a lot of the things that we've been engineering out of glass in order to make it much better and much sharper, and we put it in selectively in different parts of the frame to different degrees. People who are way better at math than me can explain that far better, but we kind of went, let's take anomalies and put them back in the image where they're going to help to beautify it and create this look that people are looking for.
So is the subject matter need to be in the center of the frame?
I don't know if you have to keep the subject in the center, but I've only seen it used in sports where they pretty much are doing everything in the subject at the center. There's not going to be any kind of, unique framing. Although we do see it rack focus in and out where it might be something in the lower corners or the upper corners of the frame. And those all seem to maintain fine. But I'm sure just because of the nature of optics being that the edges are always the worst area, they definitely probably put the most of it back in the edges.
Is this all in the lens or is it in concert with the camera?
So essentially this effect is all in the lens, but there is a modification on some of the Sony cameras now that does help to use this in an outdoor sports environment where the light's going to constantly change, and they have a feature called variable ND, variable neutral density. And instead of using the joystick on the camera control RCP to change the aperture of the lens, you can now set it at a fixed aperture, 1.7, 2.0, whatever it is, to maintain that depth of field and readjust the operation so that you're changing neutral density in a gradient way rather than doing steps and stops. You have complete control without ever changing your aperture, so your depth of field remains the same until you get to lens ramping point, but at that point you get the lens compression anyway.
Really interesting. Thank you so much, Paul.
All right, thank you for having me.